I don't know how God communicates with you, how he talks with you. But with me, it's primarily like a series of thoughts and ideas, and it's not a pressure kind of thing. It's more like maybe I ought to do that. And through the day Monday, I was having that all day long. It was like he said, "Okay, preacher." Sometimes he calls me preacher. Most of the time, he calls me Wilson. He said, "Okay, Wilson. Sunday y'all are having a birthday party for the church. It has been years since you talked to the church about why the church exists. Why are you even in existence? Why do you keep meeting at Open Door Community Church? It may be time, preacher, for you to remind everybody, here's why we're here." And so by the end of that day, I thought, well, that must be what he wants me to do. And by the end of the next day, it was like, yep, this is it. So I'm going to talk to you today from Luke chapter 15, which is the chapter that gave birth to Open Door. If you want to know why we're in existence, it's Luke chapter 15. This is the chapter where Jesus gives us three of his famous parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, or the prodigal son. And Jesus is using these three stories to tell us the same basic truth about God, and that is, he is a seeking God. He has been a seeking God since almost the beginning of time. You remember Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve's first sin. And the Bible says that because of their shame and embarrassment, they hid. But God went looking for them and said, "Adam, where are you?" Because God is a seeking God. 4,000 years or so after that, Jesus came to earth. And when the skeptics and the critics cornered him and asked him, "Why are you here? What are you doing here?" he said, "I have come to seek and save the lost." And when he was criticized by the religious structure of the day for spending time with the sinners, he basically told them these three stories about the nature of God. God, he said, is like this. He's like a shepherd who has 100 sheep. Now, everybody who heard him tell this story had seen this. Many of them were probably shepherds themselves. At the end of the day, the shepherd would stand at the door to the sheepfold and touch the shoulder of each of his sheep with his staff and count them off to make sure everyone was there. And one day he's counting 97, 98, 99, one's missing. He takes them back out of the pen and recounts 97, 98, 99. And Jesus said he leaves the 99 and goes after the lost sheep until he finds it. God, he said, is like that. God, he said, is like a woman who had 10 coins, and in her house, one of them gets misplaced. And she tears her house upside down until she finds that lost coin, and she calls her friends and rejoices. God, Jesus said, is like that. God is like the father who had 2 sons, and one of them in his rebellion leaves home, and the father waits patiently. And when he sees his son come back home, he runs to him and welcomes him. God is a seeking God. And if that's true, and we are his people, then we too must be seeking people. We as individuals, we as a church, must be on constant search and rescue mission. And you hear this phrase quite a few times through your attendance here at Open Door. Our mission is to stand by the door, pointing people to God. Now, Luke 15 starts with a very interesting couple of verses. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." The very first thing that you see about the impact and the effect that Jesus has on people is that the non-religious people were attracted to him. That's a fascinating thing. The religious people hated him, and the non-religious people were attracted to him. Now, he mentions two groups of people, tax collectors and sinners. The tax collectors were notoriously evil people, cruel people. Basically, here's what happened. The tax collectors were Jews that the Romans put in position to collect taxes from their fellow Jewish people. That's what the Romans did to collect their taxes. And basically, the Romans told the tax collectors, here's how much we need from you. Anything you get above that goes into your pocket. So the tax collectors would do anything they could to get as much as they could. They would send what Rome required and keep the rest for themselves. They were hated. They were notoriously wicked, unethical people. The word sinners, and you may notice that in your translation it probably has sinners in quotation marks, because it was a specific term for a specific group of people in those days. Religious people have been the same from the beginning of time. God makes a statement, and then we think we have to define what he means by that. And so God gave, as you know, the 10 commandments. By the time of Jesus' day, the religious leaders, the rabbis, had basically said, we need to be able to know whether or not you're keeping these 10 commandments, and so we're going to make sub-commands. All right, he said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you can do this, but you can't do this. You can cook this, but not this. You can eat this and not this. You can go here and not there. By the time of Jesus' day, there were 600 applications of the 10 Commandments. Doesn't that sound like church? God says, here's the 10 Commandments, and we say, but we want to make sure we know exactly what you got to do. So here's 600 of them. And the people that could not keep those 600 commands were called sinners. When I think about that, I think, those are a lot of the people that I know today who are not in church. In the first century, this is what they would be classified as. They're doing the best they can. They're just overwhelmed by all the lists. Because every church they go to has a different list. And what's on this list isn't on that list. And what's yes on this list is no on that list. And they're overwhelmed by all of the do's and don'ts. And they're overwhelmed by all of the lists. I was talking to a lady a few years ago at work, and she was, wanting to get back to church. And I was telling her a little bit about what we were and why we were in existence, and said, I think you'll be comfortable there. She says, I don't know, Ken. She said, I'd be embarrassed because I don't even know the basic Bible stories. I don't know anything. A lot of people out there like that have a spiritual hunger. They want an answer, but they're overwhelmed by all of the religiosity of the day. And so the non-religious people were drawn to Jesus. Today, there are so many people that used to be in church. I talked to a lady 2 weeks ago, and she said, I used to be, and she named her church. She said, but now I'm heathen. And basically, she's left church. There are unchurched people in our society, but there are also de-churched people, post-church people. I don't know how many people I've met through the years, and you have too, who aren't in church because of how they were treated by people in church or how they were treated by the church. I used to say that if we wanted to have the largest support group in the CSRA, we should start a group of Church Haters Anonymous. Because there are a lot of people, especially, in this part of the country, who grew up in church, but something happened in their lives. And as a result of that, they got so bitter toward the guise of Christianity that they're no longer involved in church. These are the people that were constantly attracted to Jesus. And because of that, the religious people hated him. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were repelled by him because he attracted sinners. And religious people didn't like it. He attracted sinners. That was the central lesson of Christ's life, is the sinners were drawn to him. And the religious people hated him. It says they muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." That word muttered is a great word. One translation says constantly muttering. It's the word for, and you understand this if you ever have children. This is what the word muttering means. Everybody knows what it is, that muttering. Well, that's what the religious people were doing about Jesus. See him over there, he's just eating with the sinners. He just like the sinners. Just that constant muttering is what the religious people were doing about Jesus. And so when he's criticized for prioritizing the non-religious, when he's criticized for making his message understandable to the common people, he didn't spend time defending himself. He didn't argue. He just told them 3 stories about a lost sheep and a lost coin and a lost son. Now, we got to define terms. What do we mean when we talk about being lost? We sing Amazing Grace. I once was lost, but now I found. What in the world does that mean? Is it the bumper sticker that says, "Don't follow me, I'm lost too"? What does it mean when we say we're lost? Well, he describes 3 different ways of being lost in these parables. Some are lost in the wilderness because of their nature. These are the sheep. Sheep are interesting creatures. When God calls us his sheep, it is not a compliment. Sheep are willful and they will go their own way, and other sheep will follow them. If one of the sheep heads out over a cliff, the whole rest of the flock's just going to follow that sheep and go off the cliff. We saw that when Donna and I were dating and we were in Florida. There's a town in the central part of Florida called Lake Wales, and they had an outdoor amphitheater, and for a couple of months before Easter, they would put on a drama of the last week of the life of Christ. And what made it unique is they had the live animals, not just sheep and cows. They had donkeys and camels, and it was interesting. But we went there a couple of different times, and each time we went, a sheep got lost and started leaving their area and started going up to the hillside where the crowd is, and here comes another one, and here comes another one. And they actually had shepherds whose job it was to try to keep those sheep in place. And so when God wanted to describe what we're like as a sinner, he said, all we like sheep have gone astray. We've just wandered away. And some are lost because of their nature. Others are lost in the church because of carelessness. This is the lost coin. Now, he doesn't say church, he says house. But the application that I'm making is, this was a lady who was in her house and through carelessness lost one of her coins. What that says to me is it's possible in the church to be lost. It is possible to be in church and not know that Christ has forgiven your sins. Billy Graham used to say that the greatest mission field in the United States was Sunday morning at 11 o'clock in church. He said there are so many people who go to church, but they don't know Jesus. It's possible to be a church attender and not know Christ, still be lost. Some are lost, like the prodigal son, through rebellion, through his own self-centeredness, through his own rebellion. He goes to his father and says, I want my part of the inheritance now, goes out and wastes it, eventually comes to himself and comes back home. But the point of each of these stories is that it is the nature of God to seek the lost. It is the nature of God's people to seek the lost. Those who are spiritually seeking, those who are church hurt, those who used to be in church, because God values the one. If there's a consistent lesson through Luke 15, it is God values the one. Now, we can understand one son out of two, and we can kind of understand looking for one coin out of 10, but one sheep out of 100? That seems a bit out of proportion. But he says, and I'm not sure that there's a more convicting verse for preachers than verse 7. I tell you in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. Oh. Well, I tell you, in the early days, that convicted me. Because, man, I needed the 99. You know? Because the 99 tithe. And the 99 will do children's ministry and youth ministry and visitation ministry. And the 99 will do all these things. And it's the temptation of every pastor I know to go after the 99. God says there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents. There was an Easter Sunday a few years ago, and we had comment cards, and we handed out the comment cards. And as I try to do every Easter Sunday and Christmas Sunday, give a clear presentation of the gospel, opportunity for people to pray to receive Christ. And we had a pretty good crowd that Sunday. We were excited. A lot of people at church on Easter Sunday. And as I was going through the offering at the end of the service, one of the comment cards was in there. And the guy signed it and he said, I prayed the prayer today. That's what got God excited. Not that we had a big crowd, but that somebody had given their lives to Christ. So what does this mean for us? All these stories, all these prioritizing the one, what does it mean for us? I don't know how long it's been since you've been to our website, opendoorcommunity.net, but you will find on our website what it means to us. First page, it says open, and by the way, Open Door Community Church was not something that was a whim. You know, it is intended to be what we are. And so on our front page, it says Open Door is a community of people who are seekers after God. If you're unconvinced about God or Christianity or the church, but are honestly seeking answers, here you'll find an open door. If you're church inexperienced and you're not sure what you'll find at church, here you'll find an open door. If you're brand new to the Christian faith and are seeking answers to how your relationship with God should change your life, here you'll find an open door. If you've been a Christian for some time and are concerned about impacting your world for Christ, here you'll find an open door. If you're a devoted follower of Christ and are looking for a place where you can make a real difference in people's lives, here you'll find an open door. That's why we exist, to be an open door. I remember in our early days, we were going out and I was purchasing some paint or something. And so I said, what's the name of your church? I said, Open Door Community Church. He said, that means I can come. I said, yeah, that's what it means. And then on our website, you'll find our mission statement. It's a simple sentence, but man, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this sentence. The mission of Open Door Community Church is to help unbelievers find their way to God by presenting biblical Christianity in an understandable and believable way. Now, there are three critical words in that statement. Biblical Christianity. There's a lot of stuff out there that claims to be Christianity that has no basis in the Bible. We endeavor to emphasize biblical Christianity. The word believable, presenting biblical Christianity in a believable way. You ever been in churches that weren't believable? I was a terrible person. I had lost everything I had. I had nothing. I got saved. The next day, I got a 300% increase on my job, and somebody gave me a new car, and I got a new house, and everything's great. Sorry, not believable. We talk here. Every once in a while, you'll hear me say, we're real here. You know, we talk about, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we struggle. And sometimes things don't go the way we want them to. But the Christian faith tells us that God is with us through those times. Believable and understandable. Sometimes my kids get talking about stuff. I have no idea what they're talking about. They're my children. They're in my family. I have no idea what they're talking about. Listen to them talk about business stuff. I have no clue what they're talking about. And there's a lot of people who come to church who leave having no clue what they were talking about, because if we're not careful, churches have lingo. We have jargon. And so we try to make sure that we strip away the religious jargon and the religious terminology so that a person who comes in and it's their first time in church, maybe ever, or maybe in decades, will at least be able to understand what went on in that service. Also on the website, it says this: we believe the Bible has practical information to help us in our daily living, and our pastor's teachings reflect that. Again, I try hard to keep religious jargon, out of our sermons, because there are a lot of people, even people in church, have different terms than other people do. And I don't ever want you to come in and hear me say, well, you need to be justified and sanctified and washed in the blood of the Lamb and get ready to be glorified. What? What in the world does any of that mean? To some of us, let alone somebody who hadn't been in church in a long time. Let's define our terms. That's why you'll find, like when we have the Lord's Supper and things, I'm very clear about why we do this, what we're going to do, what the process is going to be. You don't have to participate, because I want people who, when they come into this place, they may not agree with what we've said. They may argue with me on their way out the door, but at least I want them to have understood, so that maybe someday in the future, when they're crying out for help, something will come back to them and say, oh, that's what he was talking about. You hear me say this: yeah, I want to help you get to heaven, but I also want to help you get through your week. And sometimes it's harder to get through your week, isn't it? And I want to make sure that what we do here on Sunday morning helps us in our daily lives. I remember a guy who, it was the first time he'd been in church in a long time, and he told me this several months later. He said, I came into that church and I thought, the Bible is practical. He said, I never knew that. I never knew the Bible had anything to say about your regular life. And he said, I went to work the next day and I told everyone, did you know that the Bible has something to do with our daily living? Yeah, it does. A lot of people don't know that. There are people through the years who have found Christ through this ministry. Some of them are in heaven. And there are others, maybe your friends, maybe your family members, maybe a neighbor, who need to find Christ through this ministry. And your faithfulness in giving and attending help us keep Open Door open. And we're here for those who aren't here yet. We're not here just for us. We're here for those who aren't here yet. About the time we started the church, I discovered a man named Samuel Shoemaker. Shoemaker pastored Calvary Church in New York. He was a strong advocate of personally sharing your faith with unchurched people. And in his day, that was revolutionary and controversial. He would go out on the streets and engage college students with dialogues about faith. One of the people that he impacted was a young man named Bill Wilson, who came to faith through Shoemaker's ministry, and says that without Shoemaker's influence, AA would not have existed. Because he said, I built the 12 steps based on the principles that came from Shoemaker's preaching and teaching. And when he was challenged about why he was spending so much time with unchurched people, he wrote this. It's on the screen. It's on the back of your sermon notes, called I Stand by the Door. For over 25 years, I have not been able to read this without tears. So I'm not even going to try today. That's why I gave it to you. Because this is why we exist. I stand by the door. The most important door in the world. The door through men walk when they find God. I want you to read that. I'm not going to pause the service so you can read it, but I want you to read it because he talks about how, the temptation for Christians is to go way deep in the things of God and get so far away from people that they lose sight of those who don't yet know God. And he says sometimes people start to get into God and they start searching for God, and all of a sudden they run into some strange people. You ever been in some of those places and he said, and they want to run. So he said, so I stand outside the door so I could tell them, no, don't leave. You found Christ, you're spoiled for anything else. But he said, there's still people outside the door. Take it down to the last paragraph. Yeah. Just the last paragraph. I understand the people who go way in. In the middle of the page, as for me, I shall take my old accustomed place. That's why we're here. For the one or the two or the five who need somebody to tell them, here's how you find God. That's why we exist. That's why you hear me say over and over, standing by the door, pointing people to God. We had just been in existence, I don't know, maybe just a few weeks. And a couple of my teenagers came up to me and said, Pastor Ken, we found a song that can be our theme song. Al Denson had just released an album, and on it was a song called The Door. And our kids were excited about what we were doing, and they said, Pastor Ken, this can be our theme. And they were right. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today.